Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. I'm Abram Kielsmeyer-Jones, and this is Overview of Jonah in Hebrew. This is January 8th, 2026, and I thought as this new year begins that we might look at Jonah, which is one of the easier books to read in Hebrew. And so folks who are thinking about a new Hebrew Bible reading plan may have Jonah on their mind. And if not, it's just 4 chapters. Very powerful, self-contained story. Again, it's good for practicing Hebrew, even if you've had just a semester or so. So we're going to look at Jonah overall as a book today, looking at the outline of the book. We'll look at 2 different outlines today, and we'll talk through that. We're also going to talk just a little bit about the beginning of the book and how that helps us to understand what's going on in the whole book overall. We'll look at frequently occurring vocabulary in Jonah. I'm going to show how to use accordance to quickly figure out different vocabulary frequency. We'll talk about the Hebrew grammar of Jonah and how you can research that. And then I'll end with just a short overview of some recommended commentaries for Jonah. This handout that you've got here that's showing on my screen is available to you in the Go-To app. That's the platform that we use. If you haven't been in a few weeks, you may notice that the layout has changed. And so we appreciate your patience and any flexibility that requires as they have changed the platform. That was something that Go-To did. But the materials section has a link to the handout. It should say files available, and it's overview of Hebrew Jonah 2026. So if you click on that, that will open a PDF. You should be able to see my screen and hear me now. And if you want to communicate with me, there's a questions box. It should be at the top of your Go-To panel. There's also let's see. Okay, someone says you cannot see my screen. I'm wondering if anyone can see my screen. It should be showing a PDF of Hebrew Jonah. Okay, so somebody can see it. Someone can't get the handout to download. If you go to the materials section and if you click it once, it should give you a download option. If that doesn't work, I would be happy to, well, we typically email this out anyway afterwards. Yeah, I'm clicking on download and this is what it's taking me to. So if that's not successful for whatever reason, you know what, here, let me just put a URL in the chat so that you've got that. Okay, I'm pretty sure that it's a really long URL, but I'm pretty sure that if you click it, it will take you right to the handout. So you can try that as a backup option. And if you're still having trouble with the handout, we'll email that to you afterwards. My screen is being shared. If you're not seeing the screen, it may be worth. I'm still getting used to the layout on the Go-To app. You may want to go to the very top in the middle. There's a section where it can either say no active cameras, who's talking, hide everyone. You may want to just kind of click through there to make sure that you're looking at who's talking. But I am sharing my screen, so I'm not sure what else to suggest. I'm still getting used to the platform myself, but that would be the place I'd think to look because it is sharing the screen. It would just be an issue of kind of going to one of the buttons within your Go-To app to make sure that you've got it. So one way or the other, we are recording this and we'll send out the recording afterwards. So whatever technical difficulties persist, know that you will get access to the recording and the handout sent to you in an email. And then if you are watching this on a recording, you can email me at abramkj@accordancebible.com, and I'd be happy to pass that on to you. All right, let's start talking about Jonah. Now, this outline here is a very simple one. It's just 2 parts, and it comes from the Outlines of Bible Books tool in Accordance. That is here If you go to your library here in Accordance and type in outlines, chances are pretty good you've got this tool. It's available in most collections. If you've been using Accordance for a while and made more than a couple of purchases, the chances that you've got it are good. Outlines of Bible books, it's just what it says. It's basically, if you think about taking the section headings from a print Bible and just moving them into one big document, that's what this is essentially. And it's got about that level of detail too. This is about how many section headings you'd find in any print Bible for any of these books. So it's not highly detailed, but it's a good overview and a good starting point. So I've given you that in your handout. You can also see it here in Accordance. So we've got two big sections noted here. Jonah runs from his mission is the first one. And the second one is Jonah's reluctant obedience. And you'll see that it splits it into two parts. So you've got chapter 1, verse 1, 2 through 10, and then chapter 3, verse 1, 4 through 11. Very tidy division here. And then each of these parts has more specific breakdown. Jonah's flight from the Lord, Jonah thrown overboard, Jonah's prayer, that takes up all of chapter 2. Jonah preaches in Nineveh, the Ninevites repent. And then Jonah's anger, which it's always a surprising conclusion to the book to me, even though I've read it multiple times. There's a lot there to interpret and to understand. So that's one outline. There are other ways you could outline this book with more detail or with different words, but I offer this just to give us kind of some orienting information about the story. There is another outline here that I've put into your handout. This is from the JPS Bible Commentary, and I've hyperlinked to that as well in your handout, both to the specific spot in the commentary. So if you have it, you can click on that in the handout and it should take you there. And at the bottom of the handout, I've linked to the JPS commentary itself. But if I open this up, JPS Jonah, and I'll just want to make my way to the front and make sure somewhere in the introduction that I'll find the outline here. There is a lot of great information in this commentary. You can just kind of go through it and see what all is here. But I put the handout here, and you'll notice that it's roughly the same as the other one. Part 1 is the flight and its failure. So here named Jonah runs from his mission. Part 2 is rebellion and acquiescence. And this reluctant obedience is meant to capture the same thing. And then you've got a little bit of a different breakdown, but more or less the same. Any commentary you have is likely to have an outline, or if it doesn't have an outline, it's going to have some kind of summary of the book. I'm starting from secondary sources here, but even before you get to these, I think the best thing to do for getting an outline of Jonah would be to make one yourself. And this is a short enough book that you can do that in a reasonable amount of time. If we were to say, all right, you're preaching through the Sermon on the Mount, but first make an outline of the whole book of Matthew. That would be a very good thing to do. It would take a while. It's 28 chapters. This one is just 4 chapters, and they're not very long. And so this would be a great opportunity, I think, to just outline the book on your own. You can do that in, I sometimes like to do that offline, like no devices anywhere. So I'll either find a print Bible, or if, say, maybe I've got a version in Accordance that I don't have in print, I might even just print it off. I might just print those 4 chapters, and you can make a selection and print it. And then I'll do the outline pen and paper, or pencil and paper might even be better. You can even turn off the section headings in Accordance. So if you really just wanted to say, all right, I want to try to read Jonah with fresh eyes, which I would recommend, if you go to your set text pane display, under Advanced, you can hide the section headings. It is clicked on Show, but if you unselect that, now those are gone. And so you could print it out like this, or copy and paste it into Pages or Word and print it that way. So That would be the first step, I would think, is just outline it on your own. But whether you take that step or not, there are two outlines in your handout that you can use, and any of your other commentaries are likely to have an outline of the book as well. So that's by way of getting going. Let me just say a little bit more too. If you were to really look at this in depth, and in fact, we're not going to get much past a couple of verses with this, but one way to understand this outline is to start from Hebrew, which helps us understand what the book is. Now, we called this overview of Hebrew Jonah, so I am assuming some familiarity or at least comfort with Hebrew on your part. So this next part will go into Hebrew. Whether you read the whole book in Hebrew or not, let's just start with the first verse. I'm going to open a parallel pane. I recently have had the BHS open. So let's scroll this up. And we get Vayhi Devar Adonai, or Yahweh, El Yonah, Ben Amitai Lemor. And left to right, you've got, and came or arrived the word of the Lord. So the word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai, saying, and in many translations, that saying, you see it as redundant, or really it's understood as comma quote, because it's introducing direct speech. Now, this first verse already tells us a lot about the book. It tells us that Jonah is a prophetic book. The fact that the word of the Lord came, that's Vayhi, or I guess you could say it happened to Jonah, but really it's coming, it's arriving, you could even say been revealed to Jonah. You might just triple click this word with Vayhi here. If you triple click it, you'll get to your default Hebrew lexicon. There are a lot of ways to translate Hayah, but the word of the Lord came to Jonah is probably what you'll see in most translations. But there is a sense in which it is God's revealed word, because this is the word of the Lord. Importantly, this is not the word of Jonah. It is not begun like, hey, here's a message from Jonah. And in fact, as we read on, that becomes quite clear. This word, which is go immediately to Nineveh, that is not what Jonah wants to do. He wrestles with that word the whole time. So it is a word not his own. And in fact, that situates him squarely among the prophets, because the prophets speak words that are not their own. They speak the word of the Lord, or they'll say something like a declaration of the Lord, or listen to what the Lord says. You will find that language throughout the prophetic books. So he's being identified as a prophet. Even if we don't know much else about him, we do get some biographical information. He's the son of Amittai, and you could see what else you've got in your commentaries on that particular relationship and his family background. There does seem to be something about this son of Amittai that wants to identify him more specifically than just Jonah. But maybe the most important thing about Jonah is that he is the one to whom the word of the Lord comes. And then he's going to be charged to communicate that word with others. I note here in the handout that last word of Jonah 1:1, saying, Lemor, is communicating that God's word is about to come. And that sets up the whole narrative. This is from the JPS Tanakh translation. Yahweh says, go at once to Nineveh, that great city, and proclaim judgment upon it, for their wickedness has come before me. So you get a lot in that first verse. It really sets up the whole thing. It tells you what kind of a book it is. It tells you Jonah's relationship to the Lord. It also tells you really who the two main characters are. I guess the Ninevites would be a third main character, but it's about Jonah, and really it's about the Lord. Ultimately, this book is about Yahweh, but Jonah is a major character. Nineveh comes up next. So we get quite a bit in these first two verses. We're going to get more as we read on. We're not going to get into that right now, but let me just pause there and check in with you and see what comments or questions you've got. And as you take a moment to type those, you can You can put those in the questions box. Let me also say that we get this same formulation, Devar Adonai, a second time in 3:1. So you've got Vayhi Devar Adonai, and if I advance by chapter, here it is again, Vayhi Devar Adonai Al Yonah. Same thing. The word of the Lord came to Jonah. And then this time it says, Shenit Lemor, a second time. But this wording here, the word of the Lord came to Jonah, and then Lemor, here's the content of that word. That is identical. And in fact, we have again, go immediately to Nineveh. So that breaks up the book quite nicely in terms of the outline. And this is one of the advantages to reading it through. You would maybe, by the time you got to 3:1, recognize these words again, or maybe have them in your notes already, and that ought to stand out. But I'm far from the first to observe this. Many commentaries say this, but this gives the book a natural two-part structure, which you see in these outlines above. And so, of course, this Jonah manuscript is not initially versified or with headings. Those, of course, came later. But even in the Hebrew text itself, you've got something that is indicating here's another major section. So that's why you'll often see this book split into these two parts. But let's pause there and see what questions or comments you have. This is all by way of outline, and I just dabble a little bit in this first verse here to show you that even just a few minutes with the Hebrew text can often reveal quite a bit. And so you're pretty well set up now, I think, if you've got these two major sections. Maybe you get this on an initial kind of quick read through, and then you can go and get more detailed. You maybe even want to get more detailed in these outlines. That's, of course, up to you. But what questions or comments do you have? And then we'll move on to frequently occurring vocabulary. I'll either, oh, good. Good. Some technical difficulties are being resolved. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, again, thanks for the patience, and yeah, we're getting used to this change in platform. All right, I don't see any questions about the outline. Of course, you're free at any time to type a question in. I'll either respond individually or anonymously share your question with the group. Let's talk about vocabulary in Jonah. There are at least two reasons I can see why you would want to think about vocabulary in terms of frequency. The first reason would be, and you'll see Hebrew grammar textbooks take this approach, more frequently occurring words are words that I'm more likely to know. Most Hebrew textbooks group vocabulary by frequency. And so you start by learning the words that occur many times, like and or the, and that's just because they occur so frequently. And so by the time you've learned, and you can find statistics in some of your textbooks, but by the time you've learned, 200 or 300 words, that gives you X percent of the Hebrew Bible. You're well on your way to reading it. And so that's one reason we want to look at frequently occurring vocabulary. Before I read Jonah in Hebrew, for example, I might want to just see a list and look it through, and maybe even keep it open and refer to it. A second reason to think about vocabulary in terms of its frequency is that can give us a kind of pointer to what particular themes there are. It's not a scientific method necessarily, but it's true that words that occur a lot they're probably important. I mean, you might get a definite article that occurs a lot. That doesn't mean that's a theme of the book. But when you see, for example, a word like gadol, great, it occurs 14 times, that's probably something to pay attention to. So we'll talk about how to get this list in just a moment, but let's just stay with this word great. We'll get to the list. I'll walk us through these steps momentarily, but this word great comes up 14 times, gadol. Nineveh, the great city. There's a great wind. There are men becoming very afraid. There's a great storm. Their fear of the Lord is great. A lot of greatness in chapter 1. I mean, everything is really big in Jonah. The city Nineveh is big. The wind is big. The accompanying fear is big. The storm is big. The fish is big. Nineveh again in 3:2. Notice that parallelism with chapter 1. Nineveh is a great city. In chapter 3, it's the great ones of Nineveh who repent. And then by this time in chapter 4, there's almost some irony here, or maybe irony is the right word, or some surprise or something for the reader to wrestle with. Everything has been really big, great, mega everything. And that's also the word used to describe Jonah's displeasure with Nineveh's repentance. And then again, I mean, just the emotional temperature is very high. Gadol kind of pitches this in a high register. Jonah is greatly happy about this plant that God provides for shade. And then in the end, Nineveh is referred to again as the great city. And in fact, Nineveh, the great city, serves as bookends in Jonah. So much else, as I've said here, is great. So the stakes are just high all throughout the book. The emotions are high, the storm is high, the repentance is for this great city who has done, by the way, great evil to people, which is in part why Jonah is reluctant to go in the first place. But let's talk about how we got to this word and what other words come up. This is a pretty simple task in accordance. It's 3 steps here. I've put them all in your handout, but let me walk us through how to get there. I'm opening up accordance. I'm going to open up a Hebrew Bible text. So I can leave this open, but I'll just go to plus here, and I could go to Hebrew texts and BHS. So I've got a Hebrew Bible text here, and the first step is just to search it for all words, that's the asterisk, with the range of a book. So you could do this a couple ways. One way is just type asterisk. I'm sorry, asterisk, and you need a question mark there for a wild card. That gives you all the words everywhere in the whole Hebrew Bible. So this is, and you'll notice they're bold and red. You could jump ahead to Jonah this way, but what we want really is a range. So I'm going to go to asterisk, right click, enter command, range, and just type in Jonah. So there you don't actually need the question mark. This is just giving you asterisk means every word in the book of Jonah. Let's go through that again, because you'll notice when I'm in verses, my cursor is at the far left of the screen because I'm typing in Jonah 1 or whatever it is. When I switch to words, my cursor now is over here at the right. And that's because Hebrew is a right to left language. And so I'm going to be typing that way, asterisk space, which makes my cursor move not to the right, but to the left. And then you just want to enter your range. You can right click to enter a command. You could even do a keyboard shortcut right there. You could go to your search window, enter command and range. And then I'm going to just type in Jonah. Now, what that will do is I'll still get everything in bold and red, but it's going to narrow the search down. Instead of showing me the whole Hebrew Bible, it's showing me just Jonah. So if I scroll all the way up and down through this, I've got just Jonah. And it shows me, too, that there are 48 verses in Jonah, whereas before I saw the whole Hebrew Bible. I've just got Jonah. So 48 verses. And from there now, we can use analytics. So that's the second step. That's under word count totals. So I'm going to go to this little pie chart here. Analytics, 980 hits, but I want word count totals. And I'm going to go to analysis. And that gives me a list, some information. Let me make this bigger. Total number of verses, 48. So 48 verses in Jonah. That's good to know. 980 total words. So that would be word count. Like if you were to write an essay and wanted to know how many words it was, that was word count total. And then 254 different forms. This is sorted alphabetically right now, but there's one more step. I want to sort by count going down. So I'm going to do that. Sort by count down. And now what I've got, and you can resize any of this stuff, make it easier to see. You can even customize this display, and there's more here with analytics that we won't get into. But now what I've got is a list of vocabulary from Jonah with how many times it occurs in Jonah, so that I have a sense of which words are going to come up the most. And so these would be words I would at the least want to probably memorize the first 10 or 20 of these before reading Jonah, just to have a sense of what's going to come up. So like I said, you've got words like and the and to and toward and from. I don't think you can really derive too much of a conclusion from these words that will top the list in any book. It is interesting that you get these two directional words quite a bit here, to, toward, or from. Those are, they're not uncommon words exactly. So in a sense, that's not surprising, but that is a lot of directional movement. So that's just interesting to note. This is a book that it's going somewhere, or it's following someone going somewhere. And then Yahweh for God, Lord, God, comes up 26 times. So in fact, God is named more than Jonah. God is named more than the Ninevites. And so, if you were to say who's the main character of Jonah, your initial answer might be Jonah, and you could maybe defend that. But vocabulary-wise, the word Lord occurs more often. And so that's just a reminder, however you interpret that, whatever you conclude from that, that the Lord is a pretty active character in this book. And I'm just seeing that from this vocabulary list. There's a lot of speaking here. Jonah, of course, comes up. Here's another name for God, Elohim. And so you even add that to the count up here. This is where I found Gadol, great. C comes up a lot, so there's a lot there, and so on. So once I've got this search, it just kind of perusing through it can be useful. To know comes up 6 times. To walk or to go, halak, comes up 6 times. It's useful to look through this both for the sake of improving your vocabulary and also understanding what's going on in the book. I saw a question here about the sailors called. Here, let me just put this in the chat. Let me make sure I'm putting this in the right place. Somebody asks, the sailors call on Yahweh in 1:14, whereas the Ninevites believed on Elohim 3:5. From an exegetical perspective, what significance would you conclude? Yeah, that's a great question. And we could even see in this vocabulary listing here that there's these 2 titles for God, which if we hadn't picked it up already by looking at this list, we might wonder why the one in some places and the other in other places. And so you could even just right from this list, you notice this note here, triple click a form to see its occurrences. Well, I'm going to take accordance up on that. So I'm going to triple click this form. And sure enough, it gave me its occurrences. Now it's doing this in the whole Hebrew Bible, so I can just go right back in here and add a range and see Yahweh just in Jonah. So let's do the same thing with God. 1, 2, 3, triple click. Let me add my range again. And then I'm going to put these side by side. I'm going to close this. So now what I've got is Elohim in Jonah 16 times as promised. And I managed to lose my other search because I recycled my tab. So let me just find that again briefly. This will be a review of getting to analysis. Alphabetical, count down. I want to turn off that recycle tab because I want it to open a new tab now with Yahweh. So triple click. Okay, there we go. Now what I'm going to do is put these next to each other, and I can even rename these. I can name this Elohim, And I can rename this Yahweh or Adonai if you like to use that pronunciation. Let me add the range again. This is a long way to answer the question, but this is how I would answer the question if I were thinking about it myself. What I would do now, and you may want to play with the font size, open up a parallel translation, etc. But what I would do now is go through and see, all right, well, where does Elohim come up? Who's using it? And where does Yahweh come up? Who's using it? And so you can see here that God is first identified as Yahweh, and that's who this is that we're dealing with. But then in verse 5, we get Elohim, but that's not necessarily God, Yahweh. It's their own God. So that's Elohim in the generic sense. The question here was the Ninevites. So let's skip ahead to them. So Elohim here is just God, and you see this lowercase g. So here's Elohim Hashemayim, Elohe Hashemayim, so the God of heaven. So even on Jonah's lips, you get that. In fact, you get the Lord God. Some of this you could just consider to be poetic variation, but to the point of your question, what is the exegetical significance of this? Here's 3:5. The people of Nineveh believed in God, Elohim, and they declared a fast and put on sackcloth from the greatest to the least of them. Now, at this point, their repentance has come, I believe. So this is not that, yeah, and interesting, they're crying out earnestly to Elohim, and God saw their actions and God relented. So it's all Elohim here, which is really interesting. I don't think I would interpret this as they used to believe in Elohim, now they believe in Yahweh. I think for whatever reason, Jonah is giving us Elohim here and Yahweh elsewhere. There's a footnote here that doesn't seem interested in that question, which doesn't mean it's not a good question. It just doesn't treat it. I might confirm this with my commentaries and see what they have to say. But my initial read of this is such a good question. My initial read of this is that it doesn't mean they believed in a lesser version of Yahweh, or they partly believed, or they got some of the way. I think it's just God named differently here for whatever reason, whether that's poetic variation or is there something cultural there. This would be a great point to go to the info pane and check the commentaries. The one I mentioned at the end here, this JPS Bible commentary, that would be the one I would think that is most likely to address that particular question. And it doesn't look like it does. The people of Nineveh believed in God. It doesn't have that particular question. So I might just go through. You could try this Zondervan exegetical commentary. They trusted God. The text does not go so far as to say that the citizens of Nineveh converted to the monotheistic worship of Yahweh. All right, so this does take that a little bit more interpretively. I'm not sure I agree with that, but I would need to spend more time with it. So that's an excellent question. And yeah, I think the way that I would go further on this is look more at the commentaries. I would really spend some more time. I mean, we did this kind of quickly just because I wanted to make sure folks knew how to set it up, but I would spend more time looking through the uses of Elohim versus the uses of Yahweh. I would even just make a list like I did here with Gadol. I'd put it in 2 columns. You could do that on the computer if that's easier. Just because you're using accordance doesn't mean pen and paper are obsolete. I probably would just get pen and paper out and make a 2-column list and see, can I conclude anything about this? And so it may be as simple as poetic variation, or it may be something deeper. Certainly Youngblood in his commentary is suggesting that, and you'll see some other commentaries that will address that particular point. But many commentaries may not. They may just take this as confession and belief, and it just happens to be a different name. So great question. I think the way to do more justice is just further study. Yeah, here's a comment. Yahweh is never used with the Ninevites. Yeah, that's interesting. And again, we might ask why, which could have any number of answers. So I'm putting that comment in the chat. What other questions do you have? And I can go over the technical stuff again as far as finding the vocabulary, especially if you're newer to accordance and would like to see that again. I'm happy to do that again. But we'll pause there before we move into grammar. Oh, here's a great question. Let me put this in the chat anonymously for people to see what I'm responding to, and I'll read it as well. Helpful response. Thank you. Will accordance offer more Jewish commentaries in the future? That is a good question, and I don't know the answer to that. I do know if you go to, and you probably know this, but in app, you can use an in-app web browser. The JPS commentary series is there. I think everything that's been published in print is in accordance, with the exception of there's a fairly new JPS, Jewish Publication Society commentary that covers part of the Psalms. That's a 5-part series that's going to be released over the next however many years. This is probably the best place to go, and I'll put this in the chat. This is certainly not cheap, and you could look at these individually, but there's the Torah commentary, but there's also this commentator's Bible. There's the Torah, a modern commentary, and the Bible's Many Voices. So there's some other things here that you could check out. But yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I certainly have benefited from the ones that I've accessed. Any other comments or questions on vocabulary before we move into grammar? Part of my hope here is just to show how a couple of really simple techniques in accordance can get you pretty efficiently to some information that you can then use for a really productive springboard for study. I mean, accordance is not trying to make you go fast or slow on anything, but it is trying to help with convenience, and certainly word searching through accordance is so much easier than if you were to go through and kind of circle all the forms of Yahweh yourself. So getting that much set up, I think, is a great place to jump off of. And you might do that with other vocabulary, just something as simple as this, making a list of every time a word occurs. You could do that with all those directional words, the to and the from. Maybe you want to see a list of all the movement in the book of Jonah. That would be an interesting list to make. Well, let's talk about the grammar of Jonah. And I guess more than anything, I'm going to talk about how you could learn more about this. But the Hebrew grammar of Jonah would be another thing I'd want to think about. And same as with number 2 here. For one, I want to get better at grammar in Hebrew as I'm reading. And for 2, I want to see, are there any unique constructions that Jonah uses? Are there any unique grammatical features? Anything that I want to pay attention to that maybe it happens a lot in other books too. The easiest way to do this, other than reading through the text, is to go through the text with your info pane open. So I've got an info pane here. I'll just keep the English open for now. If I go to add parallel, here's info pane. And I used this already to access commentaries. There's a whole section called grammars. Let me go back to Jonah 1:1 and we'll start there. There's a whole section called grammars, and you can even, I'm just going to click, hold, drag, and drop this up toward the top so I see it right away. In this grammars section, anytime you've got a verse that has a reference in your grammar, it will show up here. So I'm in Jonah 1:1, and I don't see anything on grammars. But I scroll ahead to Jonah 1:2, info for Jonah 1:2, and now that surfaces 2 Hebrew grammars in my library. So whatever's in your library will show up here. 2 Hebrew grammars that have Jonah 1:2. So I'm going to click on this. Here's Waltke and O'Connor. Just click on the book cover. And here's Jonah 1:2, the great city of Nineveh. That is part of a larger section. An adjective normally cannot modify a name directly. And I might scroll up. I might even just click open the content sidebar and see where I am in the book. So one thing I will do when I'm reading through a book is I'll read through the verse, and then I'll open the info pane, or I'll just keep the info pane open, and I'll see what's there on the grammar. Here's Juan Muraoka, also 1-2. This is a more an advanced grammar, so you'll get some terminology that you may or may not be familiar with. In fact, this one has 2 hits, so I can even advance down by hit and see something similar to what we saw in Walt Key O'Connor. Normally, an adjective cannot directly qualify a proper noun. Thus, Nineveh the Great is, and then he's got the Hebrew here with the reference to 1-2. So you might continue on this way. As I said, sometimes you won't have anything. So Jonah 1:1 is not showing anything in my grammars. And that just means that none of my grammars have Jonah 1:1 listed as a reference. What Accordance is doing is essentially doing a research search. It's searching all of your grammars for the reference of Jonah 1:1, and it's returning the results right here in your info pane without you having to do the research search. So now Jonah 1:2, I've got something. If I scroll slowly, Jonah 1:3, I've got something else. Here's Basics of Biblical Hebrew. I'm going to click this open in a new tab, knowing that it will tell me something about Jonah 1:3. And this, in fact, is part of a larger section toward the end of the grammar called Hebrew Reading Jonah and the Character of God. So this is great. This is going to give me, there's not a whole lot of detailed grammar per se on this, but it's kind of a bigger exposition, which might really help me as I'm making my way through the book. So continue on through, and as you're reading, again, some verses won't have anything, other verses will. I think Jonah, it's hard to say what's more likely to occur in your grammars, but Jonah is just such a familiar text and such a good representative text that it does seem to me you'll find that more often in your grammars than, if you were to like pick a psalm at random or something like that. So I'm scrolling through more quickly now, and you can watch on the far right of my screen, more verses than not have something under the grammar section. And so as I'm reading through, maybe this even happens on my second or third pass as I'm outlining, I'm finding the grammars here and just clicking open to see what they have. Sometimes it won't be much. It will just be Jonah 2:10 is a cross-reference for an example somewhere else. But other times you'll find something more substantive, as here, the prophet is commissioned a second time. And this is part of that. I think that's part of that same article that we were looking at before. So info pane, paying special attention to grammars. And if you wanted to do it not verse by verse, but kind of more holistically, you could do what the info pane is doing, but do it yourself in a broader way. File, new tab, research. And here I'm going to go to search my grammars. So my research tab lets me choose what I search and where I search it. And I'm going to search my grammars. And I'm going to search by verses. And here I'm just going to type in Jonah. Let me close some other windows here. So I'm not searching the word Jonah. I'm searching Jonah as a reference. If you wanted to be sure, you could even just do Jonah 1-4. But I'm just going to type in Jonah for verses and search all my grammars. So I've got some hits in this Greek grammar, which is interesting. I've got some hits in the Septuagint grammar, 31 hits in Gesenius, 35 hits in Juan Muraoka, 20 hits in Pratico and Van Pelt. And I might do this at the same time that I'm doing this frequently occurring vocabulary. So maybe I've read through Jonah once and I just want to step back and look at all the vocab, and now I can do that with the grammar too, dipping in and out on different things. Maybe you even say, all right, Pratico Van Pelt is a beginning grammar. I'm just going to look at that. And then you can click on open and look through the different hits there in the book and see all the times that Jonah is mentioned and what it is that is being discussed there. Now, a lot of that is that one Hebrew reading section, but then you have other sections like negation of the cohortative and jussive. Al na novada, do not let us perish. And that's given as an example. So in that way, you can get an overview of the grammar, and you may also find in your commentary introductions some comment on the grammar of Jonah. I have found that something like this is few and far between in commentaries, even in the technical commentaries. But it's worth taking a look, and we'll talk more about these commentaries in just a moment, but especially ones that are more Hebrew language oriented. When you go to the introduction of any commentary, you may get a comment along the lines of, watch for this feature in Jonah, or Jonah likes to do this, or other prophetic books use this device, whereas Jonah uses this one. You might find that in your commentary introductions, but I would check there as well, knowing that you yourself can go through the different info pane options for the grammar and see what's there. All right, we're going to move on to commentaries next. Let me just check in on questions. Any questions about grammar in Jonah? There is a book that's not available in accordance that might be useful to you. Let me just pull it up here. I did not link to it in the handout, but it's Baylor Greek Handbook Jonah. And this is it, a handbook on the Hebrew text. I'm going to just put the link to this in the chat. Let me find the chat, and here's the link. Like I say, that's not in accordance, but this is, I don't know if we can find any sample pages. You could look for that on your own, but that's actually, I reviewed that here some time ago. I wonder if this is the kind of comment he gives you. I mean, it's really detailed. And so this, you're not, here's a sample. You're not kind of stuck with whether or not your info pane surface is a reference from a grammar, or how detailed even the most exegetical commentary. I mean, this one is really just meant to be essentially a grammatical commentary on Jonah. So this is a really good one if you're getting deep into this. So I put that in the chat and suggest that as an option. Here are 4 really good commentaries for Hebrew Jonah. Zondervan Exegetical Commentary on the Old Testament by Kevin Youngblood. I mentioned that earlier, but let me pull it up in accordance. Again, I'll just go to a web browser. You could probably just type in by author name and get right to it. So you can get this as part of a set. I don't think it's available individually. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you can get it either as part of the Old Testament or as part of Old Testament and New Testament together. Here it is. Good. Okay, I thought it was. All right, here's the, let me, this I think is already in your handout actually. So here's the individual volume, and it's slightly revised from the first edition, but yeah, this is an excellent resource. It's got a lot of detail on the original language. Let me just pull up some of an exegetical commentary, Old Testament, and get to Jonah here. All right, you're going to find a really good blend here of background information, how you would understand this in terms of interpretation, translation, exegesis, structure. I mean, this is the outline here. There's a lot here. And you'll notice here too that the Hebrew is given in Hebrew font. It begins with the author's translation. I know I'm going quickly through this, but let me just give you a sense of what the commentary itself is like. You'll get context always, detailed outline, and then you'll get something like this, where you've got the Hebrew text and how it essentially relates to each other. It's kind of a modified, simplified version of something like diagrams, not as detailed, but this is going to get really in depth with the Hebrew text. And then even here, you're going to get at the phrase level and the word level and talking about how frequently things occur. I have found this to be just a remarkable commentary, and I think really serves as a good one-stop shop. I have used it for preaching. I have used it for personal study. I've used it for trying to improve my Hebrew. I've used it just for personal devotional understanding and application of Jonah. It really covers it all, which is rare because typically commentaries by necessity have a focus, but this one just covers so much ground. So I wrote more about it here and here at my personal site, but the accordance link is right here, Zondervan Exegetical Commentary. And then JPS Bible Commentary, surprisingly, that is not as detailed on the Hebrew, even though it's from the Jewish Publication Society, and those commentaries do treat the Hebrew pretty well. It's not quite as detailed as the Zondervan one, but it's also just beautifully written. Let me just pull that open, and we'll take a quick look at that. I'm going to go to the title page here. It is in the, I don't know if it's this particular volume, but at least in the first 5 books, they have, no, it's the whole series. Yeah, they have Chaim Potok as the literary editor. Chaim Potok, the novelist. Maybe you read My Name is Asher Lev or The Chosen in high school or something like that. But the fact that a commentary has a literary editor, it makes it like this is something you could put by your bedside table and read. I mean, it just flows really well. It's not like a scientific, or it feels less like a textbook and more like a novel, if I can put it that way, while still being detailed with regard to the text. So you'll see here that it's not taking the Hebrew quite the same way that the Zondervan exegetical commentary text is, but it is going phrase by phrase. And if there's something that the commentator thinks the reader needs to understand in terms of the Hebrew, they'll mention that. But phrase by phrase, you'll get a really good breakdown here and begin to understand more of what's going on in the text. So excellent commentary. I've, like I said, used that for multiple purposes. 2 more, Leslie Allen's New International Commentary on the Old Testament is really good. McComiskey's Minor Prophets, an exegetical and expository commentary. Here, Jonah exists as part of a larger whole. Let me just make this easier to see. This is an interesting commentary because it has detailed translation notes, essentially, and then something more exegetical in addition. So there's a lot here, and you'll find a lot of Hebrew here as well. In fact, you can see here, it follows a similar phrase by phrase breakdown as JPS, but here you've got the actual Hebrew in there. And I wonder if this one would treat that question of Elohim versus Yahweh. This would be one that I would check. So yeah, essentially you're starting with verse by verse translation notes and then commentary on top of it. So it's kind of a double commentary. And if you see this in print, it's if I recall, it's like 3 different sections. One is the translation, which is the commentator's original translation. The second section is the notes, which is Hebrew translation notes. And then the third section is the commentary itself, which is talking maybe in a more exegetical interpretive sense. So when you're looking at this in accordance, I mean, it scrolls kind of straight up and down, but the print version, it's easy to see all 3 at once. But you'll just want to make sure you're getting everything with here, because there's an awful lot here. And I find this a really good commentary. I believe it's out of print in print. At least it has. Last time I checked, it's an older commentary, but it's in accordance. And for work on the minor prophets, it's excellent. There are other good commentaries on Jonah. It's one of those books that's been written about a lot, so we don't lack for resources on it. But I wanted to start with the outline and get us oriented, just as we recap here and wrap up, and also talk about how you might do more of this on your own. It's just such a rewarding exercise to read through a book and come up with your own outline. Even if you've seen other outlines before, maybe you're just confirming what you've already seen or catching something else. We talked about vocabulary in Jonah and why that matters and how to get there and how to look at a list. Talked about Hebrew grammar in Jonah, and then talked about some recommended commentaries. These are all hyperlinked here in your handout. Let's spend the last couple minutes with any comments or questions you've got, whether it's anything that we've covered or anything that we haven't. Here's a great comment, and I will put this in the chat. Somebody says, is there any significance to Jonah's preservation when he was swallowed 3 days and nights and Jesus's resurrection on the third day? They both seem to demonstrate a death and resurrection event. Yeah, absolutely. And that would be, you may get that just reading through the book already. Something we didn't do that would be worth doing too, especially if you're reading Jonah in light of both testaments. You might just you could do this pretty quickly in an English text. Take Jonah. Now, you're not searching the reference Jonah. Here, you're searching the word Jonah. And in fact, you will find Jonah here in the New Testament. And we get this explicit link. Just as Jonah was in the belly of the huge fish, Gadol, it was the word in Hebrew, for 3 days and 3 nights. So the Son of Man will be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. And then we've got Nineveh here. So yeah, I think if you're coming at it from the vantage point of not just what does Jonah say when Jonah is written, but then how is Jonah used in the future and especially in the New Testament, I think just starting with a word search for Jonah, and you'll get to great verses like that. So yeah, absolutely. I think that symbolism, very much in Christian tradition, it's read that way. Oh, somebody says, how do you toggle between PDF and accordance? What keys? I'm on a Mac, and it's a little different on Windows, but on Mac, I hold down Command and press Tab to switch, and then I let go. So so I'm holding down Tab right now, and I'm toggling between all my open apps. So I've got Go-To open, I've got Accordance open, I've got the PDF open. And so just Command Tab, and you can switch back and forth. Someone on Windows can correct me. I know there's a way to do it on Windows. Maybe it's Control something, but that's what I do on Mac anyway. Here's a question. Let me put this in the chat, and I will answer it. Somebody asked, go to new interface, makes your screen unimodal. That is always the top screen, and you can bring anything on top. Do you know a setting that allows it to act like a regular window? I will look for one, but I don't know of one. I think it's Zoom or some other app. I know I've got other apps that do that, and to use a technical term, it is annoying when you're trying to open something else and it only opens behind your app. And there may not be a way to change that, but if I find one out, I will let you know. Yeah, that would be too bad if it didn't allow you to do that. But I know that I've seen that with other apps too, and yeah, it's not super convenient. The only other thing I could think of is if you toggle between, and we'll wrap up with this, but if you toggle between views on Go-To, you can minimize it and basically make it like a dashboard. So that would be the best thing I could think of. But yeah, I acknowledge that limitation. All right, let me just make sure I've gotten one more question here, and we'll wrap up with this. Somebody says, do you find Hebrew audio helpful? Yes, definitely. And if so, how do you slow down the pronunciation? Long-standing feature request that I have made myself. There's no way to do it now. There is a long workaround. And just because we're out of time, I'll just give you the short version, and please email me if you want to learn more on this. But the short version is you need to find the original source files for the Hebrew audio and open them up in another app on your own, another app that can slow them down. I mean, if you're comfortable enough on a computer, you can do that. It won't be integrated into Accordance per se, but you could open it up in, like, I don't know, QuickTime or another music app and slow it down that way, because you do have those audio files on your computer as audio files when you download that module. You just have to find them through Accordance. And I'd be happy to help you through that if you email me, abramkj@accordancebible.com. Okay, here's a comment, and we'll wrap up with this. Somebody says, disable always on top, press on top menu bar, and then the more settings. Okay, great. Thanks for answering that. All right, I'm going to end the recording, and then I'll stay on for just a moment for a little bit of housekeeping. So if you're watching the recording, thanks so much for watching. abramkj@accordancebible.com with any questions or comments, or if you want the handout, I'd be happy to send it to you.